Good evening. Welcome to Township Board of Trustees meeting for Tuesday, February 26th. Mr. Guzak, would you lead us in the pledge?
All right. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda and the regular agenda.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Second.
All right, there's been a support and second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? With that, we will open the floor for citizen comments. We'll start on the left side of the room. Anyone on the left side of the room wish to comment? Sure, Mr. Ert. Good evening.
Good evening, Edward, 7212 Porter Road. I wasn't going to comment tonight, but I think it's probably necessary. I just want to bring up in regards to, I know there's some things going on with the fire department, and that they're talking maybe keeping the station open in the city or whatever for a period of time. I just want to reiterate that that station is really inadequate for the township, the growth. I've been to the last two city meetings, and they're talking about developing two-story buildings right there in the area of the fire department within a couple of blocks. They're just putting a building up there and talking about putting in parks and recs and bicycle paths and pedestrians. The fire station sits on a side street. I think it's very difficult for the fire department to get out and maneuver. And as they keep crowding all this, they have a parking problem now. They're talking about putting up temporary rental spaces for businesses right there by City Hall, which is right by the fire department. It concerns me that they can get out, even when you go down the back street there by Colony Market to Grand Blanc Road. That's backed up to the school during the day. So it scares me that if we stay in that position, we're going to really have a problem getting in and out. Other comment I want to bring up, I went to the last city council meeting, and one of the councilmen said the cost of dissolving the fire department would be expensive for the township and the city, and it'd be 80-20 split. But earlier in the meeting he talked, same councilman talked about paying for the fire services, and it's an 85-15 split. He's talking about two different directions, okay? When it comes to pay, he wants to pay 15%, but when you want to be part of it, you own 20% of it. It sounds like he's talking, I don't want to say how he's talking, but it sounds like they're being subsidized by what they're saying, by just what he's saying. They're being subsidized. He wants to spend $15 and get $20 worth of it. So I just want to bring that up. That came up from one of them, and I probably will address them at their meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ert. Mr. Bush?
Yes. Jim Bush, 5243 Lethbridge Road. I just want to make a comment. I work in Bloomfield Hills. I don't know how much you watched the news today. There was a very big fire down there. And I'm watching the fire from our parking lot, watching the smoke, and it made me realize what you have done in the last 3 years to get our fire department where it needs to be is well worth it. If that happened here, I want a department that's trained, equipped, and can handle it. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bush. How about on the right side of the room? Any public comment? No? You're welcome to come up if you'd like. You have 3 minutes. Okay. With that, we will close public or citizen comment, and we will move it to a privileged presentation and ask Chief Wiles to come forward, please. Good evening, Chief Wiles.
Well, good evening, and thank you. I couldn't be more pleased to be here tonight introducing our two newest officers to the Grand Blanc Township Police Department. You know, the key to any successful organization is to hire some good people, and we have two really good ones here that I'm honored to introduce you to today. I have no doubt that they will carry out our core values of integrity, fairness, respect, honesty, courage, and compassion. They're high quality individuals. Mr. Cody Galinsky, will you please step up here, please? This is Cody Galinsky from Allenton area, Capac, in Michigan here. Almont High School. Went to Macomb Community College where he got his associate's degree. And he went to the Macomb Police Academy where we found him there on one of our recruiting trips. And like I said, couldn't be more pleased to bring him up here to Genesee County and Grand Blanc Township. For the next 14 weeks, him and Austin Wright, who I'll introduce you to in just a minute, will be going through our field training program. Cody's just about to start our second phase of that program. More phases you get into, the more work you're expected to do. So the pressure you're feeling now is going to increase, just so you know, but I have no doubt you're going to do just fine. So with that, Clerk Lane, if you please come up.
You can come on this side of the podium, Cody.
Would you raise your right hand, please? Do you swear or affirm that you will support the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the State of Michigan, the laws of the Charter Township of Grand Blanc to the best of your ability as one of our police officers? I do. Okay.
Cody asked best friend Tom to please come up.
And you have your vest on, right? So you don't get...
We have Band-Aids over here.
We're not using armor-piercing badges, are we?
No.
Why don't we just use Velcro? This is...
There you go.
We go right through the mic.
You have 30 seconds left.
You're fine. You're fine.
He's nervous now.
Yeah. Hey, Chief.
Well, why don't we continue the meeting now, Scott? Come back later.
In the mail today, I got Cody's official license from the state of Michigan, and MCOL is our governing agency, so your official license. Mr. Austin Wright.
Cody.
Congratulations, officer.
Congratulations. Be safe.
Congratulations. Thank you. Congratulations.
Pleased to introduce Officer Austin Wright. I'm also from the Macomb Police Academy, Macomb Community College, where he got his associate's degree. Richmond High School, so kind of out, I don't know how we did this, but they're, Richmond and Capac, and it's all kind of the same area out there.
Okay.
But we got him here in Grand Blanc Township, and we couldn't be more pleased to have him here. And like I said, they're going to do great things for our community and our organization. Clerk Lane.
Would you raise your right hand, please? Do you swear or affirm that you will support the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the State of Michigan, the laws of the Charter Township of Grand Blanc to the best of your ability as you serve as our Township Police Officer? I will. Great.
If I could have Austin's brother Cameron, please come up.
You have all of our hopes and dreams that you can do it quicker.
You're
You
fine.
got the timer. I'll stick to you, little brother.
It's brothers.
Payback.
Aaron, you can get up and feel free to move about the. All right.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Okay. You want to take a couple minute break, or does everybody want to stick around for the rest of our meeting? I guess that gives me the answer.
Thanks for coming. Thank you. I'm glad
We'll
you came
take
to
a couple
support.
minutes and
Thank you.
let them leave the room.
Was it something we said?
Hey, there's some riveting stuff.
You know who's important now, Al.
It's just getting fun.
Way to go, Jack. You showed up. Mr. Wheatley. What? Mine's off.
Yeah, I know it's off. It's your fault.
Good. Oh, employment.
I'll try.
Well, I know that for a while there was a feeling of, trying to get good.
Or the people that do the programming for CFP.
Yes. It seemed like it been that way for me.
Original guys.
We did a lot of interviews where I usually sit in final
We don't do
Guys are looking at me. It's crazy.
I mean, they gotta be in their, what, mid-20s? Early 20s? I got kids that old, you know. Hard to believe. Hard to believe.
That's the flavor.
Yeah. You were babysitting then.
Yeah. Married.
December 1st, yeah? Very exciting. Very happy.
So they know which
Auburn Hills.
machines are not.
She lives in some apartments just across the street from Michael. It's a great university. Great
For
area.
the
And she's teaching at Valley.
August or next year's 2020.
Is working in South.
You know, I mean, there's just so many
Bit of a,
things
but it's, yeah.
to do.
No, that's a
I just didn't realize you guys didn't understand better.
How old are your other ones?
All right.
19, 17, and 13.
Mr. Guzak, you want to go ahead and shut the door?
Starting high school.
Well, except it locks them out then, so I
Yours
don't know, is there something we can put in there?
Yeah. Will's almost 9.
crazy, right?
9 next month.
There you go.
But is Lonnie? I'm with him.
No, he's out of state.
Oh, okay.
I'm only doing this for 2 minutes. That's a tough.
All right, Ken, let's,
What to do? Like, we're supposed to do things.
She probably learned that from somewhere.
Yeah, someone, like someone.
And I liked it.
hey, Ken,
Usually once they are, it's very good. Right.
Jack's giving us money for our fishing derby. Grant. Grant is Grant.
just moved it to Canada, huh?
Who's moving to Canada?
Okay, where were we?
Where were we?
Okay. We'll reconvene our meeting now, and congratulations to Officer Cody Galinsky and Officer Austin Wright. Looking forward to successful careers with both of them here. We have our consent agenda items that have been approved. We'll move on to future positioning, and we have a few items there. Anything to report, Mr. Lehman, on Parks and Rec that we want to cover this evening, or any
We're
further?
continuing to explore the options. We did have a meeting that was going to be scheduled for this week that we decided to postpone until
Attorney Laddie has the opportunity to speak with legal counsel for the city and the schools. I think that's coming up, David.
It is coming up next week. I can't remember if it's Tuesday or Wednesday, but we're going to get together and see if we can make some progress.
Okay.
Mr. Supervisor,
Yes.
is that just legal counsel?
Yes.
That's correct.
Thank you.
The city, the mayor and the administrator, as well as Mr. Lehman and myself, and the school superintendent were scheduled to meet this week, and we've decided to hold off until after our attorneys meet and reschedule that meeting. With that, I think I'll move down to Township Policy Review, and just wanted to, I asked Mr. Lehman to place this on the agenda, and we had a couple of things that I think came up in the past few weeks. One was we had an individual that you'll be getting a request for consideration for a liquor license, which we thought we had the policy that I passed on to this individual or this business owner of what procedure to follow. Turns out there was an additional policy that went with it that we weren't aware of. But what we're going to do, I asked Mr. Limita that we put this on the agenda, and what I would like is to give, I think we said 30 days, Mr. Limita, for anybody that has any type of policy that we want you to submit those to Mr. Limita. So if somebody has a policy on investments, the planning, building department has any kind of policies, what we want to do is assemble all those policies in one binder. Then what we will do after the 30 days, after we assemble all those policies, is that we are going to, my intention is, with this board's approval, is to review each of those policies and make any suggested changes or amendments or updates to them. We bring them back to the board and we approve them or get rid of some of them. But anyways, bottom line is we want to be able to vote on that this is the complete set of policies. If there's anything that is not in there that somebody finds at a later date, it's null and void. It really isn't fair to Mr. Limita or really anybody that all of a sudden I can pull out a policy and say, hey, Mr. Limita, you probably weren't aware of this policy, but we have a policy against this or says you have to do that. So what I would like to do is have one complete manual of policies, and I guess at the same time that we vote to approve those, we nullify anything that is not in that manual so that nobody can ever have a gotcha moment. And I believe that will work, right, Mr. Laddie, for our purposes?
It will. Sure.
Okay. So the next 30 days, if any of our board members or department heads, I know Mr. Limita will be conversing with department heads on this, but anybody that has, in fact, he has an assembly of them there. Any comment, Mr. Limita, on that process?
I think in Supervisor Bennett and I had this conversation, it really did come about. When I first got here, I asked for the policy manual so I could review it, and much to my surprise, it didn't exist. There had been policies, but we'd never actually kept them into one place. And it took quite a while to compile what I've compiled, and I think that there's nothing wrong with what we have. There may be some tweaks that we need to do. But I think it's just to really put them in and number them as whether they're administrative, whether they're financial, whether they're board policies, whether they're something else. So I want to kind of create that numbering system. And I think the most important thing, like Supervisor Bennett said, is that once we've adopted the manual that says here's all the policies as they exist now, when we add new ones in, they will follow that numbering system so we know when we brought something in. But it also then supersedes any policies that weren't included in there. And if we come across them later, it's just if they're important policies and they should be added in, we'll bring them up and we'll have the board approve them and we'll put them back in. But the reality of it is if we've got old policies that are sitting out there that don't really apply, but yet unless we rescind them, they exist forever. So I think it's better to just get a clean slate, have the board agree that this is our policy manual moving forward. It's fair to the employees. We can give everybody a copy that these are the board approved policies, and I think it just makes smart. It just makes good sense for the board and for the staff, from a legal perspective all the way around.
Mr. Massey?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I have a question about the word policy. Can you, anyone, it can be the attorney, superintendent, any board member, can you give me another word in place of policy that may occur? And where I'm going with this, I'll tell you now before you give me a word, so you understand where I'm going with this. To make sure that we all of the words that may be in someone's desk drawer under a different name, but it still reflects the same thing. Does that make sense?
I understand what you're saying. Is there something that exists that maybe isn't called a policy, but in essence operates as a policy?
Yes.
Like a procedure manual or something like that?
Well, I know that, subject to other answers, I know that we have identified various policies throughout the years in various, really they're sort of board directives maybe,
Yeah.
but we have used the term policy for a long time. You would think it would result in a stack bigger than Mr. Lehman has on his desk, but it's been a pretty consistent use of the term, but I don't know, like directive, I don't think we've used that much. So I think that's going to, policy will lead you to the best result.
And if there is anything that doesn't fit, it'll be null and void whether they called it a policy or not, because we're going to follow what's in the manual. Mr. Laddie?
Well, when in doubt, if you find something or you hear about something, you bring it,
right,
and we'll weed through it.
I'll look into my desk drawer and see what I
Yeah, maybe that's where
Get out a typewriter, huh?
Yeah.
Mr. Manser and then Mr. Thomas.
So, kind of leveraging off Trustee Massey's comment, maybe as we formalize the language of authorizing the procedures or the policies that are in the book, we could also say any other guideline, directive, procedure, whatever is, off. But the other point that I wanted to ask was, is the manual comprehensive in terms of things like employment manuals? Does it go across all of the departments that are under your direction, as well as clerk and treasury, etc.?
So, good question. It is and it isn't. I mean, there's policies that are township wide. There's policies that apply to administrative, and then there's specific policies, departments, fire department policy and procedures, police PMPs, that are separate. So while we won't ask you to necessarily adopt all of the PMPs for the fire department, those are really focused on their internal operations specific to carrying out their duties. DPW has some specific PMPs that wouldn't apply to generally. So when we talk about the policy manual, the employment manual is absolutely one of them. We've just completed our complete review of employment manual. It's been cleaned up. It's been vetted by Labor Council. It's prepared to be adopted now. That would be a part of this, because one of the things that it's that hierarchy when we sign a collective bargaining agreement with a union. Any policies that aren't specifically spoken to in the language of the collective bargaining agreement, then if we have a policy manual, either in our employment manual or policy from one of these policies, if it's not specifically addressed in language of the collective bargaining agreement, then it applies. So some of those are more broad based, and that's what we want when we talk about this manual. Is we have administrative policies that apply township wide. If you're a township employee, these policies apply to you, whether it be like sense in the workplace or smoking or firearms or those kind of things. And then the more specific ones, like I said, will boil down.
And just to also respond to Mr. Mansour before we move on to Mr. Thomas, is I think part of the exercise that I see happening here too is that when we get these in a binder and we see these are board operations policies, these are operational policies. There's also something called executive limitations, which I'm not sure we have anything labeled that right now. But there may be some things that we see that we have some holes in that we want to create some policy, so that Mr. Limita knows where his boundaries are and where we expect limitations to be. So there may be some areas that we see, hey, we have some holes here that we need to clarify some things, and so it'll allow us to see where those areas are and to fill it in. But we're taking on the fire. There may be some policies we need to set that as a board, but I think most of the policies I'm looking at here are, how the board interacts with their operations, and then all those policies that fall under operations, those would be their departments and Mr. Limita that they're, the overarching policies that this board wants to set is what I think is key here. Mr. Thomas?
Leveraging off of Trustee Mansford's leveraging of Trustee Massey's comment, what I would think that this would be, for lack of a better term, that Trustee Massey and I use all the time, is these handshake deals, i.e. the purchasing agreement with the city and the township, with the fire department, the split with, you take care of our building, we take care of our building, you take care of yours. I know that's a bad example, seeing that that's going to end shortly, but with Parks and Rec, same type of issue with the handshake deals and, we're not supposed to pay rent, but yet we do pay rent and the building. Is that what you're kind of looking for,
Well,
Superintendent?
This will,
Or Supervisor?
yeah, this will, codify or put in writing, maybe some things that some people think are policy. Like we had an investment task force meeting a couple weeks ago, and evidently there's a policy that goes through what financial institutions we've authorized to invest in. I'm not sure I've seen it, but Mr. Guzak, has seen it, and that's something that should be in our policy manual under investments. Ms. Lane brought up a policy that Mr. Laddie and I had actually passed on one policy to somebody who was applying for a liquor license, and there's some other items that were in a different policy. So it's kind of like we got to bring together these policies and put them in one place so that let's say that Mr. Limit isn't here next week, or I'm not, and something happens, somebody comes in and has to know, well, how do you operate this board? What are my limitations?
It was Trustee Massey and Clerk Lane and myself had a meeting a couple weeks ago about our records keeping, and with Superintendent Limita, and we came up with a policy just that. Well, bring it to your attention, and then vote on it to the board. But having a checklist of the information, the packets on where everything's located from switching hands from one clerk to the other clerk.
Right.
Right, Trustee Massey?
Yes, absolutely.
That they sign off saying, I verify all these documents are here,
Yes.
sign off,
They're
and
located, they're there. So I guess what we have to do now is put that into actual verbiage and then bring it to Supervisor Bennett for the board to go through it. In fact, can we put that on next month's agenda?
as far as, well, let's develop
Put it in
a
writing
possible
for you.
policy for that first, and we can put, there's going to be, I think when we get this together, I think we're going to see there's a lot of areas for need
pretty
policy. Mr.
good idea.
Limita?
Yeah, what you'll see from the existing policies now, mostly operational, there are financial, operational, employee safety, that kind of stuff, but there's very little when it comes to like board policy other than it address like the investment policy or kind of thing. And so I think that Treasurer Guzak already has some suggestions on that he wanted to make to clean up that investment policy. So I think as we go through this review, it's just a good time to take a look at those. And you brought up a great point, like kind of like board policies. I don't have a lot of those. So I know you guys, even in the last couple of years, have done some board policies as far as like we have a board policy on how we like our minutes presented or how we want our resolutions presented that we just went through. Let's memorialize those into an official policy, number it, put it in under board policies, put it in there, because then what it allows you guys to do, which is great, is to hand it to the next group of folks or the new board member, trustee who comes to sit at this dais, is you be able to give them and say, here's some things you need to know. It could be how, and just as simple as you said, like what our transition policy is from, especially board officers with the supervisor, treasurer, and clerk. Yeah, they're statutorily mandated, but why not put it in a board policy that say these are our expectations, here's our policy on how this transition will go. I think it's just a great idea because it's it's so clean, you know, that there's no guesswork about what we're trying to do, and then I can look up my administrative policies, and you guys can have your board policies, and they're all going to be in one place, and you guys have a copy, I have a copy, we all know how to operate moving forward.
Well, you're right, it takes the guesswork out of it, and, you know, I think we've got a policy on that somewhere.
We are the cleanup.
If we have a policy, it better be in there, or else we don't have one, you know, and I think it'll identify some areas where maybe we need policy just to help, you know, everybody in their positions to know how things work, and every board member will know how it works after that.
Cleanup board.
Yeah, Mr. Mansur?
I'd like to make just two other points here. That when we have policies, we probably ought to have a policy on how to change them. And we also, I think, should consider at the end of them kind of a change block where we kind of keep track of it was approved at this date, and
Yep.
then the next revision or the next whatever. There's guidelines, I
Yeah.
guess, on how to do that.
And actually, what I've seen with other boards, Mr. Mansur, is actually where they actually set up a calendar for reviewing policy. So, for example, in the month of May, we're going to review, let's say, board policy on treatment of staff, or, you know, or we're going to review they have it in policy when we'll review the superintendent. You know, so they set up a schedule for it so that happens annually or every 2 years, what have you. Good suggestion.
That'd be great when we get into the operational issues, because that's what we're in charge.
We won't be getting into operational issues.
Is my mic on?
Other than what's on the agenda.
I got it off now.
All right, so we'll move forward on that. So I ask anybody with any kind of policy to get a copy forwarded to Mr. Limata, and next month at this time we'll be hopefully going through that, or everybody will get a copy of it. Okay, under operational issues, item A, the board will consider a motion to approve the clerk's request for purchase of 2 election scanners in the amount of $11,294. Ms. Lane?
That's a total amount,
Right.
Mr. Chairman. And it's
Okay.
the price that was paid for the original machines that we have, and it's in anticipation of, with the changes because of proposal 18.3, that we'll need this equipment and want to get it set up so that we can have it ready for 2020.
So just so our residents know, that what you're referring to is that the allowing of absentee ballots and basically
We're going to be adding, because of our experience in November, we are definitely going to be adding a third AV counting board and possibly a fourth.
It's a second.
And so
Okay.
we want to have this all ready to go.
Okay, Mr. Massey?
Mr. Chair, we had a task force election meeting prior to the board meeting,
Okay,
and we were told, the board was told, last year, I believe, when we first got these machines, that we had 2 extra machines. And now, something has changed since the initial machines came in to this date. So now we need 2 more additional machines. Is that right, Clerk Lane?
The laws have changed because of 18.3 and also because we want to have backup. Because we have found it necessary to use those backups at our current 15 precincts and our 2 AV counting boards. And we definitely know we are going to be setting up at least 1 more AV counting board, or possibly 2.
so the AV counting boards require a machine, Ms. Lane?
Each AV counting board requires a machine of its own.
And so that the 2 extra that Mr. Massey's speaking of that we had ordered, we need to have those on hand as backups. The 2 that we're getting here would be for the additional AV counting boards that
Yes.
were. Mr. Thomas, you're on that task force, is that?
I would move, or right now there isn't a motion. Did you make a motion?
No.
There's not a motion on the floor, and there isn't a second. I'd like to move this until the next meeting and put it on the agenda until we get we didn't conclude our meeting. And I'd like to put this on for next month.
Beginning of March?
Yeah, at the beginning of March. Because there's some questions I have.
Is that a problem, Miss Lane, for ordering them?
No.
All right, we'll let you conclude your meeting and we'll put it on the agenda for next month.
Well, that's just my suggestion.
So you have
Well,
a
is
motion
that-
to table to next month?
That's just my suggestion. That's what I'd like to see.
Well,
But
there
what
was
do you
no
think,
motion, so,
Trustee Massey?
but you're asking to table it?
What do you think, Trustee Massey?
We need to table it. Yes.
Well, do we need a motion, Mr. Laddie,
I prefer
since
one.
it's on the agenda?
Well, there's not a.
I know it's an agenda item.
We
It's
approved the agenda.
Been the
though.
approved, unapproved
Okay.
agenda.
Yeah, you're right.
So are you making a motion, Mr. Thomas, to
I'd
table?
like to make a motion that we table this into the first meeting of March.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, item B, under operational issues, the board will consider a resolution to support Michigan Department of Natural Resources Trust Fund grant application for the Dort Highway Extension Trail. I gotta tell you, Mr. Limata has been putting in a lot of time with meetings with potential developers for the Tech Village area and for that whole region. And just some phenomenal things that could happen. This trail, you know, goes along the Dort Highway extension and would really benefit us, I think, I know, with the development and having this, you know, the best time to put this in is when the road's going in. But Mr. Limata?
Thank you, Supervisor Bennett. As part of our non-motorized trail network, we've had a long-range plan to get this connected down and eventually connected to our trail network that exists now. Mr. Wheatley from Rowe Engineering is also here this evening, who's been working with us, and obviously they're engineering the Dort Highway extension as well, so he's here to answer questions for the board as well. But we've been awarded, if you recall last year, we applied for an MDOT TAP grant to try to get this thing done. And while we scored very well, we had a lot of dialogue at the end, and they felt that because it wasn't connected at this time, it didn't have a connection to an existing trail network, that they couldn't approve it. So that kind of killed our project, and that was unfortunate because obviously the economy of scale, it's going to be much cheaper to put that multi-purpose pathway in when they're building the road. And so it was devastating, and we pulled our M&RTF grant, decided that, you know, it was over. Well, working with the Metropolitan Planning Commission and specifically Jacob Maurer, he found that there was a local TAP grant available to us, and so we applied for that. We just received notice, and we weren't the applicant. It has to be the road commission for this particular grant. But we did receive notice that we would receive funding in the amount of $441,509, which was pretty exciting. But it also means that then we have to put the rest of the grants together like we had last year. So currently what we're looking at is, what you're going to be asked for tonight is to, number one, pass a resolution that will instruct us to go after the Michigan Natural Resources Trust Fund grant again in the amount of $242,000. You'll also be asked to pass a resolution of support to the Genesee County Road Commission for accepting the grant of the $441,000. And then part of that is the township has to match 20% the amount of $110,000. That leaves $70,000, and in one of the grants resolutions we put in there to be determined. But what I can share with you is a couple things. It's right in the middle of the DDA, which is fantastic because the DDA has the ability to fund these public improvements like multipurpose trails. Number two, I've been working with Consumers Energy, and the gentleman I've been working with feel very strongly that we're in a perfect opportunity to receive funding from their foundation grant program, specifically because they're going to be doing a construction project in this exact same area that mirrors our trail pathway through their phase 3 and 4 of their pipeline project. So I know there's a question mark as how much is the township actually going to have to allocate. We're asking you to commit $110,000. But in reality, and I think Mr. Wheatley can answer this as well, a lot of the engineering has been done, and that 110 comes because that grant can't be applied toward engineering costs, so we have to show that we're covering the engineering costs. In reality, a lot of that engineering has been done because it had to been done specifically for the road project, and in the end, we believe that the engineering costs are going to come in considerably lower than what we had out in our breakdown. So even though the cost is $863,000, I believe that if the township board wants to push the support through, we can ask the DDA to support any of the financial aspects of it as well. It could be that the township doesn't have any money coming out of the general fund towards the support of this thing between the consumer's grant as it stands, but the DDA could make it up, or the board can make a decision to put some money towards the pathway. The best thing about getting the Dorp Highway pathway done is that then we can go back after that original TAP grant, because now it'll be interconnected. Now we'll be asking them to connect us down Cook to Embury to Grand Blanc Road, and based upon the conversations we had during the round of funding last year, they encouraged us to put both together right now, and they probably would have funded us, but then I would have had to I would have been scrambling trying to come up with hundreds of thousands of dollars to complete the project. But if we do this as our phase 1 project, we immediately will go after our phase 2, which is to go up Embury Road and connect the whole thing, and then it's connected with our DDA, which is just fantastic.
Yeah, and I think Cook Road is scheduled to be rebuilt the following year, so it'd be good timing for that, I believe. Mr. Wheatley, any comments? Any questions for Mr. Wheatley? Right now is the perfect time to do it, though, right? From an engineering standpoint, I mean.
Yeah, so it'll be, we're trying to set up the Dorp Highway to accept it, when it comes into play, because it's kind of definitely going to come into play. But I think Superintendent Lemus covered it pretty well. I'll be happy to answer any questions. I know the funding with the different funding sources coming into play gets a little confusing here, but so if there's any questions on that, we try to ask them.
Mr. Mansour?
So, I guess 2 questions about this. First, what, not to Mr. Wheatley, I don't think, but where would the initial $110,000 come out of? What budget would that come out of? And then second is, we're really, by this, saying we are exposing the township to up to $180,000 if we can't come up to, if we can't find other funding sources, right? So that's really bracketing our exposure.
Yeah, I would agree. Where it comes from could be a variety of sources. Again, it could come out of our capital projects fund. It could come from the DDA fund if the DDA board approves it. It could just come from your Parks and Rec millage, because it certainly would fall into Parks and Recreation programming. So you have a variety of funds that you could tap for the funds. The $180,000, if Consumers Energy doesn't come through with their grant. Or the other thing is that it's really tied to that MNRTF grant. If for some reason we didn't get the $242,000 in the MNRTF grant, we still have the ability to back away and not move forward.
Mr. Massey?
Yes. A real tough question for you. You think this is a good idea?
The trail? I think any quality of life thing you can do is a good thing for the city.
Did you hear my question?
For the city?
Do I what?
Did you hear my question?
He just said for the city.
Oh, for the city?
No, for the township. We're the township,
Yeah.
Jack, not the city.
Yeah, I think it.
Jack, I asked you a
my
question.
personal opinion?
I asked you a question. Do you think this is a good idea?
Yeah, because you're leveraging as much money as we can get from other sources to reduce the township's cost in this. So we're using some federal funds, and we're going to match it with some state funds, and then try to reduce the amount that the township's paying to the minimal amount possible.
Well, the other thing is, I believe that if we don't do it now, it won't ever happen.
Won't.
That we're putting in place something that if we don't do it, I mean, with this project, it's going to be too cost prohibitive. There's too many wetlands to be mitigated. There's too many permits, too many culverts. We won't do it. If we don't get it done with this, I don't believe it'll ever happen.
That's a good point. We're going to be riding on a lot of the coattails from those permits that we get for the Dorp Highway.
It won't happen if we don't do it. Mr. Guzak?
Yeah, so would it start in June, or when would it start?
Well, the DNR, the trust fund money that we're applying for isn't until won't be available till this time to June of 2020.
2020?
Yeah,
So the money actually wouldn't go out until 2020?
correct.
Oh, okay.
If we're looking at, the south part of the township, just now starting to be developed, if we would have done something similarly along, North Saginaw Street when this area was being developed, it would be fabulous. And I think, while we may not see the full benefit of it right now, because it's a little bit of a road to nowhere kind of thing, but it's not a road to nowhere because it actually will connect to the trails at Genesis. If we connect to down Cook to Embry, it'll connect to the trail leading out to Bicentennial, which also will be part of the Iron Bell Trail.
Mm-hmm.
And as Tech Village develops, that trail from Dort Highway Extension can actually go to the Tech Village, go down Baldwin Road. So it really is a main artery that we're looking at putting in. Mr. Thomas?
I'd like to make the resolution and move this along.
Thank you.
Support.
Okay. Ms. Lane?
Mr. Mansour?
Yes?
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Guzak?
Yes.
Mr. Massey?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Mr. Supervisor?
Yes. All right.
Supervisor.
Yes, Mr. Thomas.
I'd like to make the other resolution to support the Genesee County Road Commission Dort Highway Trail Extension construction.
Support.
Okay. Ms.
Yeah.
Lane?
Again, Mr. Mansour?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Guzak?
Yes.
Mr. Massey, myself,
Yes.
Mr. Bennett.
Yes.
I just have a question.
Yes, Mr. Guzak.
On the resolution for the Genesee County Road Commission, what is their commitment on that?
So that really is where we're committing the $110,000. That's the portion that is the engineering that can't be funded by the grant funds.
Okay, so the 110 applies to that one and doesn't apply to the previous one?
Well, it's kind of like we're offering the support. What we're saying in the resolution for the Genesee County Road Commission is, be it resolved that the Township of Grand Blanc supports the application of funding for the TAP grant for the future construction and commits with 20% matching funds provided by the township in the amount of $110,000. Now, even though it says by the township, again, that money could be provided through consumers' energy grant, could be provided from a DDA expenditure, it could be provided from the millage funds. I mean, it doesn't tell you, it just says that on our behalf.
Yep. Okay, next item on the agenda, item D, the board will consider a motion to accept the second reading and adoption of the ordinance to amend the Grand Blanc Township Water System capital fee and usage charges as stated.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Support.
Okay, there's been motion and support. Any discussion? We've gone over this a few times. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Or I'm sorry, it's a resolution.
It's an ordinance.
It's an ordinance.
Chairs.
Okay.
This is a motion?
All right.
Go ahead.
Mr. Mansour,
Well, wait a minute.
this is an ordinance, gentlemen. A roll call vote.
Board will consider a motion to accept the second reading ordinance to amend.
Yeah, so we need a roll call vote
Yes,
regardless
please.
of
Yep.
whether it says motion or resolution.
It's a motion to adopt an ordinance.
Okay, all right, in that case, it requires a,
Ordinances
Roll call
usually
vote.
require roll call votes.
okay. Go ahead, Ms. Lane.
Thomas, are you prepared to vote?
You have to vote one way or the other, right?
Yes.
No abstentions.
Yes.
Mr. Guzak,
Yes.
Mr. Massey,
Yes.
myself, yes. Mr. Supervisor?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Item E, the board will consider a resolution to approve the loan request from the DDA and authorize supervisor to execute the loan documentation.
Move.
Okay.
I'll support.
Okay.
Right.
Roll call.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Mr.
Lane.
Mansour,
Yes?
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Guzak?
Yes.
Mr. Massey?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Mr. Supervisor?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, can I just make
Yes.
one addition? There were a couple of small changes that were made to the agreement and the resolution, primarily just a clarification that the two bodies are the parties to the agreement and the resolution. and that the supervisor by the resolution is authorized to sign the agreement for the township, and then, of course, the chairman of the DDA will sign. And then for Mr. Mansour, he's been very patient, but I'm going to remove the extra in number 6. And so DDA, on behalf of the DDA, thank you for this agreement. And I think, well, later on in the agenda, we're going to talk about the development plan and TIF plan, which will be, you'll see where that money's going to go potentially.
So after this resolution is signed, Mr. Laddie, then the supervisor and Mr. George will sign the second?
Agreement.
Okay.
Correct.
However, it doesn't, I think one of the things that we talked about, doesn't mean that funds have to be transferred. It could be just on a draw that as needed.
Exactly, and that's a great, and actually Superintendent Limita and Director Sostak had that idea that the interest would only accrue on the amount drawn, and so I don't think we'll be drawing a whole lot in the interim. That's why I think the interest is a little bit, the interest is 4%, which is on the good side for the township. But I think because of that, the ability to just have the interest accrue on the draw, I think that's a great deal for both parties, frankly.
I think so too. Mr. Thomas?
I'd like to make a motion to set March 12th as a public hearing date for the Green Valley Road Repair Project.
Support.
Okay. Any discussion?
Can I make one comment on that? That
Sure.
is your committee of the whole meeting, so it's a little bit different than what we normally do.
Ms. Lane?
Mr. Supervisor, to the board, the one thing I want you to remember with this particular project, rather than others that you might have dealt, this is a repair, not a total road repavement, and it will be funded for 5 years per Mr. Guzak's talking to the bonding attorney. So when people come in, I want you to understand this is not a total redo. It's the choice they made to have this maintenance done rather than a total redo, and why it will only be for 5 years instead of 10.
Just a
Mr.
tar and
Thomas?
feather, isn't it? Is it just a tar and feather?
No.
I'm not sure what
No,
it's.
they're doing some milling,
Yeah.
2 inches of milling, but it is not as extensive. It's not going down and totally changing the base.
Right. Mr. Massey?
Mr. Chair,
Mhm.
I have a question, and I don't know who to direct my question to, but my question is, are we starting to look at different materials when we do repairs?
On the roads?
Yes.
It's the roads are the under the jurisdiction of the Genesee County Road Commission. So I know that they've actually been looking at different material. They started using some different material last year on patching that supposedly has worked out very well. MDOT had been using it for a while, and it has much more of kind of a adhesive in it, or I'm not sure, but it's supposedly when they put this in, it does not come out. But you know, this time of year, any type of patching is going to come right out, because it's basically just cold patch that they throw in the hole, and it you know, the potholes, and it's going to come out the first time it snows or freezes. So they really can't do a whole lot during the winter to patch those on any kind of permanent basis.
But there has been some discussion a few years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and I was in one of those discussions. The reason we have problems with our roads simply because we use basically the cheapest material that is on the market. I don't know whether the board
Right.
members have heard that or not, but that came directly from the governor's mouth at that time.
Hmm.
And that's been longer than
Yeah.
10 years ago, okay?
All right. Well, I'll ask at the next road commission meeting that I attend
Okay.
if they've looked at that.
Supervisor Bennett?
Yes.
I know that this is, but on the same thinking that Trustee Massey was using, I read in the paper a couple weeks ago that the Genesee County Road Commission switched to carbide blades now, carbide plows for the blades, so they'll have carbide under it, so that the plowing will stop digging up our potholes. And this is a new switch from years past. And you know, a good example, like up in the UP, when you see a plow fly by, you see sparks. You don't see that in Genesee County until recently because now they have carbide on the bottom of the plows, the plow blades.
Okay.
And my question is to Superintendent Lehman, are we gonna switch ours to the carbide base for the guides?
I don't know that we don't have those now. I have no idea what's on there, to be honest with you.
Is that'll really help with digging up the potholes. Carbide slides over cement. What we have now digs into the cement.
Some of them may even out the road.
Did you? No, just a suggestion.
Maybe I'll inquire about that. I wasn't aware of
I'd
it.
appreciate it.
Thanks, Mr. Thomas. Okay, so moving on to future agenda item. I'm sorry, Mr. Ladd.
You had
Was it
a motion and a second? I don't know
Okay.
if you took the...
All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Mr. Ladd. Future agenda items, the board will review the adopted DDA and TIF plan in preparation for the March 14th, 2019 public hearing. So, everybody has a copy of the revised copy of the development plan and the tax incremental financing plan. And if you want to take a look, I can direct you to a couple of pages that probably are the some of the highlights. If you want to turn to page number 9. What this the DDA was tasked with doing is putting together a plan that we want to make sure that we put some estimated costs in here. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Laddie or Mr. Limita, but we didn't want to short ourselves, so we've overestimated on some of these things, because if our plan actually comes up short of, let's say that the overall plan is meant over the next 30 years or 20 years to generate $20 million, we need to make sure that our plan doesn't say, well, we're only going to spend 5 of it, because then they're going to come back and say, well, then why are you collecting this money if you're only going to spend $5 million out of the 20 you're collecting? So you'll see some generous estimated costs there, but you get into this, you never know, like the sewers and water. You can see some of the plans there. Page number 10, you'll see the Village Tech trunk line sewer, stormwater, transportation system. One of the areas that has been a concern for many of our DDA board members with businesses in that area is the traffic patterns and the type of roads that we have there. They're not Class A roads that will hold up with heavy truck traffic. And with the building of Magna with their large facility and several others looking at coming into the area, we need to make sure those roads are brought up to speed. So you'll see some work in that area as well. You'll see technology infrastructure. We want to make sure we budget for some things that maybe we don't even know what's coming down the pipe with regard to technology, whether it's being able to put in high-speed fiber optic, what have you. You see public design, things like street furnishing, signage, public art, pathway development. And turning to page number 12. That you'll see one of the things that has been talked about is skilled trades and vocational training. That several of the DDA board members, if not all, thought that wouldn't it be great if we could train young people or anybody really in that vicinity and have them go right from vocational school and learning specific jobs and going right to work for the businesses in that area. We've budgeted for some redevelopment of some properties, marketing and branding, some work on business incubator. Mr. Lehman, what have I left out on that plan portion? Anything that you want to highlight that, on
No.
that part of it?
I think it's good. I think what you really will see is a lot of plans around infrastructure that's going to encourage investment in that few thousand acre DDA district. And whether it be through water and sewer, they looked at capital fees, and I know that as board members, you guys have heard, you know, like our capital fees, if only our capital fees were a little bit cheaper, that would encourage development. Well, the DDA has the ability to do that. One of the things that we had talked about for many years before the creation of the DDA was that when we're working with the developers along Tech Village, that we were willing as a township to put the water and sewer infrastructure, the mains in place, because we knew we'd make it up on capital fees as they started to fill out the development. Now the DDA is going to reimburse from their tax capture to the township, so that's a $3.9 million investment that the township won't have to make out of their enterprise funds. Instead, it's going to be reimbursed by the DDA. So the creation of this DDA district and really capturing that is great news. And I think probably now's as good a time as any just to tell you that it's very promising. We had a taxable base value of $83,802,000 in that entire Tech Village as a base value December 31st, 2017. So for our 2019 value, which would be based on December 31st, 2018, $99,567,000. That's an increase of $15,700. That just shows you the potential with Magna and Wellbridge going in there, and I think that's just great news. It shows that we're going to have
15 million, you mean?
15,765,000. So it's an incredible dollar amount to
Increase in 1 year.
You know, that's our captured value of it for those value added, that incremental taxes. So having that in that district, just phenomenal. We're going to be able to fund the DDA moving forward, and so it's exciting for all of us because it's going to give the DDA the ability to start to work with some of those funds. Maybe they won't even need the $200,000 that you guys just agreed to loan them, but they probably will in the short term.
So if you look at page 29, you'll see the tax roll of all the properties in the DDA, property by property. And that goes from page 29 to page 34. On page 35, you'll see exactly what Mr. Lehman was talking about, that the estimated capture for Blanc Charter Township. And you'll see by year what the estimated captured TIF revenue would be. And we're going to be advanced on that a little bit further than what we had estimated. Probably in the next few meetings we'll get a better report on where we're at with that. The rest of the pages are, you'll see on page number 36, the taxable value and what millages are. The following pages, 37 through 45, are the various taxing entities and what type of revenue they would have received that is now being captured by the TIF and the DDA. Mr. Mansur?
President Bennett, I'm trying to understand exactly what the funding looks like here. So
where are you at on page?
Page 30, 35 versus, I guess, 35. So just so I understand it, so we've established a taxable value, kind of a baseline, right?
Yes.
And then we're going to, like we said, you're expecting the value to go up over time. So let's just take calendar year 2019 on this estimate. So we started at 71 million. We're at 72.6, we think, could be estimated. So $1.4 million captured value. So are we saying that the DDA is going to get $31,000 of that, or how should I read this?
Correct.
Yep.
Okay.
And Mr. Lehman said, I think you heard?
Yeah, the 15 million, apparently that's quite underestimated. So, so as I did a quick scan in the projects here, it looked like there was around $30 million of, is that about
Projects.
right? Projects. So if I look at this through 2048, we're at $17 million. I mean, obviously we'll get this bump, which is a great thing. So it's going to be a while before we can get to those projects, maybe.
So yes, again, when we're looking at the DDA and our capture, and that would be one of the things about tempering the enthusiasm of the DDA board members for moving some of this forward, is that we're in it for the long haul. This is, we've got, roughly over 3,000 acres to develop within the district. So you're going to get a lot of developers who come in and say, hey, I got this great plan, give me $8 million worth of incentives and I'll build this phenomenal thing. And that's for the DDA to say, that's fantastic, we're excited, we can discount your capital fees, or we're willing to put a sewer main in, or we're willing to help you with this. It's about how they're going to spend the money wisely. And they're going to have to live within that. So it's exciting that we're considerably higher captured value than we anticipated. Again, this hasn't gone through board of review yet. It could be adjusted down, but it won't be adjusted down that much. I've already sent an inquiry in to Doug Piggott from Rowe, who's been working with us on this, to maybe take a look at the numbers. We may update these, but it's just a matter of, can they have the ability to bond projects, and then you start looking at that captured TIF revenue. That would be the money that they would have available to even pay down bond principal and interest if they were to do something like that. I mean, it's just, that's going to be the dollar amount. That's their budget over in that right hand column that they have to work with.
Okay, thank you.
So they're gonna get 31 grand.
Okay.
Next year they'll get 63.
So we will be scheduling a public hearing on this for March 14th.
We've already done it.
Yep, we've already done it, so we're looking forward to getting the public. Mr. Laddie?
Yeah, all the homeowners have been, or all the property owners are invited, the taxing jurisdictions are invited. They're going to come out and take a look at your plan, and hopefully if it meets with your approval, subject to the comments the public makes, you'll adopt these two plans as ordinances, and then the DDA will begin their planning on what to tackle first.
So we're within the time frame that we need to be, right, Mr. Laddie, as far as...
We are, not by a whole lot, but we are within the time frame, thanks to the quick work of everybody involved. Hopefully it looks like we're gonna make that first capture.
Awesome.
Okay. Ms. Lane?
Mr. Supervisor, Mr. Laddie and I have also scheduled the Citizens Council to meet. Would you explain to the board what they're going to do before our meeting?
Sure, this is interesting. You may recall we appointed a Citizens Council to make comments on the development plan and the TIF plan, and that is because there were more than 100 residents that lived in the district, but also arguably in the development area. And so what they're an advisory board, basically to the DDA, but we're also inviting their comments on the development plan and TIF plan. And we set that meeting up, and I sent correspondence to them by regular mail. They have access to the proposed plan, and we're going to meet, I think, a week from Thursday, half hour before your planning commission meets. And it really is an interesting body because they're advisory and their attendance is really discretionary. They can, if they want to participate, they can participate. We have to set it up. We have to invite them. We have to solicit their comments and provide information. It'd be interesting to see who shows up for that meeting. You might see them. You might see their comments actually. Technically, they're allowed to give their comments in writing 20 days after you have adopted the ordinances. If they meet, one of my goals of having this meeting a week from Thursday will be to facilitate their comments quicker than that 20-day period, so we can begin to publish and adopt the ordinances. So we're on schedule. Everything's going great.
Good. Okay. Mr. Massey?
Mr. Supervisor, earlier as you were going through the brochure, you mentioned about roads.
Yes.
If I understood you correctly, were you saying that the load on the roads should be taken care of before the vehicle movement start?
Well, we're already seeing, a lot of increased traffic in that area out south of Baldwin Road, well, the Baldwin Holly area right there. I think what this plan does allow us to set money aside for assisting with road improvement projects, whether it's engineering or what the case may be, to help with that so that it happens quicker. Sometimes, for example, Magna with their building, they had to put a turn off or what you want to call it, I'm not sure, but it basically add another lane so that people, and so the DDA would be able to assist with that, if other businesses coming into the area are needing that, or the biggest issue is making that a Class A road so that heavy trucks can travel it, maybe even widen some of it. So.
But the county does own the road, and they're the ones that have to determine it, right? And then,
Well, yeah, we'd work with the county.
right, because
The county is already actually involved with the Magna project and what have you out there, so they're well aware of the issues. With that, we'll move on to. Before we move into executive session, I think Chief Wiles. I don't know, Chief Burdett, you have anything for us? Okay, I think Chief Wiles. What's that? I'm sorry. Okay.
Chief, just real quick, a couple things. The first thing is, yesterday you may have seen through our social media that the police department and fire department were honored by Salvation Army for the Red Kettle campaign that we did. And I know from the police department officers John Strom and Officer Tim Beakey were awarded GEM awards, going the extra mile for all the work they put in setting that up. So kudos to them. They did a tremendous job, and obviously did a lot of good with the partnership with the fire department for the Salvation Army and the community in general. But the real reason I wanted to step up here was we got some exciting news the other day. Superintendent Lehman was contacted by the Michigan Township Association and was asked if Officer Wes Evans would be willing to present at the annual conference for the Michigan Township Association in Grand Rapids, which is April 1st through the 4th.
Fabulous.
They had in attendance about 1,200 people there. And for Wes to be recognized for his efforts and his abilities to present and have information, his expertise is certainly noteworthy. He's accepted that invitation, so he's going to present, and his topic specifically is going to be about marijuana and traffic safety, and how that affects the body, how it affects drivers, what it can do to communities, and then he'll also delve into some of the other drugs and how drugs and driving are totally different than drinking and driving, and what communities can do to combat that. There will be a little section in his presentation about the successes we've had in the police department. We're coming up on 3 years now. We haven't had a drug or alcohol-related fatality on our roadways in the township, which is kudos to the men and women out on the road, doing the job every day. So, good news for him. It would be great if you're available April 1st through the 4th in Grand Rapids to go out and catch his presentation. It will be very good, I can tell you. I've seen him present several times, and the guy's amazing. He knows his stuff, and he's a great presenter on this topic. So if you're available, it'd be great if you can attend. Thank you.
Congratulations, and please pass along our congrats to him as well. Okay, with that, I believe we need executive session, Mr. Laddie.
You do to discuss an employee contract. Looks like Mr. Guzak has a question.
Okay.
I just have one other comment I wanted to make if I could. I know there's been a lot of discussion about the fire department and everything, and I've had a lot of people contact me, and I just wanted to restate, what we stated before. Superintendent Lehman, to yourself, the whole board member, we've all indicated that, on April 26th, it's not going to be any different. If there is a fire in the city, it's going to be handled. And of course, we would just build the township, we would build the city if they haven't signed all the documents. So I just wanted the people in the city to know that there's no worries, nothing's going to change. We're going to protect them and all their properties, and we'll just build the city if it occurs.
Mr. Chair.
Well,
Let me say
yes. Mr. Massey.
You have a comment first?
No, go ahead.
I think that latter part that you said, I think you better rethink what you're saying, and I need something to come from the supervisor.
Well, I did talk to the supervisor before this. I even said this, okay?
I don't know what you mean about building, because there's some additional information that's floating around, and I think we have to be very cautious about saying that without further discussion, because that's some information that's floating around, and we're gonna hear more about it
Right.
as we.
Let me-
Well, my
Yeah.
main concern
Well,
is that the people
yeah.
don't need to
Right.
worry about their
Well-
building. If you don't wanna talk about how it's gonna be paid, that's fine. I just wanted them to, our fire department is professional. Those people are gonna take care of those people. Those lives are gonna be protected, the properties are gonna be protected. And if you don't wanna talk about, how it's gonna be paid, that's fine. But that
Well,
was.
it
the
isn't a
concern.
matter of how, it's two things. One is there's mutual aid agreements between all municipalities. So whether it's Burton, Atlas Township, anybody who has a situation that they can't handle on their own, then we will assist with that if we're called in. But they have to have their own response to that fire before we're going to go out. If the city chooses to go on their own, that's their decision, and we'll support them with mutual aid. We've asked them to let us know by March 1st what their intention is, and I believe Mr. Laddie's had conversation with their attorney, and we're progressing, and we'll,
They understand that deadline?
yeah,
And,
so,
so I think.
what happens on April 26th is that the commission ceases to exist, and hopefully the city will. And I guess it doesn't cease to, because we have to just dissolve the equipment, what have you.
Yeah, we still have to resolve the equipment
Yeah.
issues and things like that, but that will be the effective date of our resolution, and then the
Yeah.
unwinding from that point will
Right,
tackle as it.
but the city will need to have an agreement in place with
Well,
us.
We'll need to at least have begun and made progress on an agreement fairly quickly. And again,
Right.
we want their intention, we just want them to signal their intention by March 1st.
So, yeah, we aren't going to leave anybody high and dry, because if they go on their own, we'll have a mutual aid agreement, I would assume. They would want that. So, we'll wait for their answer. Okay,
Supervisor
yes.
Bennett. I can understand what Treasurer Guzak's saying, and what you're saying, Supervisor Bennett, is that we would never, ever, ever let any harm come to our neighbors, as long as, but I can understand what Trustee Massey, the point he was making, is that we're not going to charge them per incident. It'll be a set contract. It's not going to be per incident.
Well,
I think
I
that's
didn't-
how Trustee
right.
Massey took it.
Yeah.
So just for a little bit of clarification,
Right.
you're both talking the same language.
Okay,
but it's
let's
not
move on.
per.
So, does somebody want to make a motion to go in executive session?
So moved, Mr. Chair, to discuss the labor
Okay.
contract.
It's been a motion, it's been seconded.
Who seconded the motion, please?
I'll second it.
Okay,
Thank you.
Mr. Guzak?
All right, Mr. Mansour,
Yes.
Mr. Thomas.
Yes.
Mr. Guzak, Mr.
Yes.
Massey, myself, yes, Mr. Bennett.
Yes.